message is simply this: we're coming to play this season. They have added some top notch players to their roster. And I know some people feel that when you have too much talent, people get unhappy. People don't like the fact that they're not playing like they used to play. And therefore, they're not, you know, as interested. But this is a different type of NFL season, I think. I think it's different because of the contracts that are being signed, that players can actually play themselves into bigger contracts. And I think the Eagles, by signing Asamoah and Ronnie Brown and Bunk Lee and Vince Young and, you know, basically it's made this team extraordinarily dangerous and essentially made this team kind of a team that you can't take a week off on just because we all know injuries happen in the NFL. And in fact, the players who start ahead of these guys are injury prone players. I mean, Vince Young backing up Michael Vick. Michael Vick gets hurt every season. So to have a backup quarterback that's capable of playing is pretty smart. Mr. McCoy for the Eagles, he always gets hurt. And having a Ronnie Brown to back him up is perfect sense. And think about rotating, you know, Cromartie, Asante Samuels, and Asamoah as defensive backs. It's going to be hard to complete passes against this secondary. But I love this only because of one thing. Someone called the Eagles the Dream Team. Come on, folks. The Dream Team was a collection of Hall of Fame players who went overseas and destroyed people. Let's let this team do the things first before we call them a Dream Team, number one. And let us all remember that the defending Super Bowl champions are the Green Bay Packers. And not only that, the Green Bay Packers, they're getting back players who didn't even play last year in the Super Bowl. A couple of their guys who were injured, who were main players on their team, they're coming back this year. Jermichael Finley was hurt last year. Ryan Grant was hurt last year. So before we start coronating the Eagles, let's not forget about the team that has the ring. Some more good. This weekend, speaking of the NFL, is Hall of Fame weekend. And some of my favorite players of my generation are going into the Hall of Fame. Everyone has an opinion about Deion Sanders. Everyone has an opinion about Shannon Sharpe, Marshall Faulk, Richard Dent. I happen to love all these gentlemen. Now, Chris Hamburger is funny. I remember when I was first growing up and watching football with my father, and we sit down and watch Giant games, and the Giants would play the Redskins. I used to always laugh at that guy's last name, thinking, come on, there's no football player really named Hamburger. And for years, I used to think his last name was Hamburger. But the Hall figures that he is qualified to be in, and you can't criticize it because they voted him in. And of course, Mr. Ed Sable's in, and you can't criticize Mr. Sable going in because he's the guy who essentially has allowed us to see NFL from behind the scenes. He's basically opened up a vault of information and behind the scenes stuff that has enabled us as football fans throughout our lives to be able to enjoy football for what it is. But it's going to be interesting, though, with the speeches this weekend because a lot of these guys going in were big-time talkers. I mean, Sharpe, NFL Film shows that great clip of Sharpe talking smack about somebody needs to send the National Guard in to help the Patriots because the Broncos were massacring the Patriots. We all know how much crap Deion talked on the field. Richard Dent was a big talker, too. Marshall Faulk, well, he was quiet. But of all the players that are going in, he's probably the one that most people feel has the most redemptive qualities. Because Marshall Faulk's career started out pretty rocky. I mean, he was supposed to be the savior with the Colts. In fact, Peyton Manning and Marshall Faulk played together the first year. A lot of people don't remember that. But they moved him on to the Colts. And a lot of people felt that, that Faulk was the reason why the Colts were struggling early on. I mean, Faulk was replacing Eric Dickerson. But he never lived up to that hype in Indianapolis. But then he became a star in St. Louis, and now he's in the Hall. I remember Marshall Faulk having a huge game in college one time. He ran for 383 yards in a game. And I remember staying up late one night watching. I couldn't believe what I was watching. And remembering that saying that he was supposed to be a defensive back. That colleges down south were recruiting him to play DB and not running back. And I always laughed at that because I was like, this guy, is a beast as a running back. And if he's this good as a running back and he was only being recruited as a defensive back, oh my goodness. Deion Sanders, folks, I know a lot of people criticize Deion and say he never tackled. But there's one question I've always wondered, and I watched this special the other night about Deion, and that question was answered for me. I always wondered why no one who ever went up against Deion ever complained about the way Deion played. Now you say, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is no one ever complained about his physicality. No one ever said, yeah, when I lined up as a receiver, I knew I can just run through him and I can push him around or I can out-physical him and this, that, and the other thing. No one ever said that. And that includes Jerry Rice. That includes Michael Irvin. That includes Rod Smith. That includes a lot of great players over the years. No one ever said that about Deion Sanders. And so I was always fascinated when I heard the sports announcers talk about, well, Deion's soft. He doesn't tackle. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. Rod Woodson. Rod Woodson is the guy. Woodson tackles. Woodson does everything. But I never, ever, ever heard any of the receivers ever talk smack about Deion. To me, that's the ultimate sign of respect. I mean, Rod Woodson got his knees broken by Barry Sanders at the end of his career. Now, yes, some people might say, well, Marvin Harrison put that double move on Deion and that gave him turf toe. But it's not the same. Richard Dent was somebody who impacted the game, no doubt. I mean, he asked the New York Giants, asked the Packers, asked the Vikings how much Richard Dent impacted football games. I mean, he was the MVP of the Super Bowl in a game the team won 46-10. That's all you need to know about how good he was. Chris Hamburger, he was a good player. I don't think he was a great player. He wasn't a Hall of Fame player in my opinion, but I don't have to vote. And, of course, Shannon Sharpe. Shannon Sharpe has got many Super Bowl rings. He was key ingredients to teams winning Super Bowls. He deserves to be in. He's the all-time leading receiver up until last season when Tony passed him. So I got nothing against that. So I'm happy for some of these men getting in the Hall of Fame. It is time for Charles Haley and Chris Carter and Jerry Kramer to get in. But we'll debate that topic at another time. Some more good. I usually don't talk about the MMA on my shows. And the